After a pretty solid trilogy that involved the adventures of the large seas, mythology, and unforgettable characters, we waited 4 years for the 4th film. It sucked. It's honestly one of the biggest disappointments of my movie-going life, and I waited another 6 years to finally give it another shot. And you know what? It still sucks. Everything I remember hating about it was still there. The only positive thing was, well, that it didn't get worse. Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, and for God knows why it's called that, is the story of Jack Sparrow, now without the Black Pearl, on the search for the Fountain of Youth. On the way, he runs into an old flame, the famous Blackbeard, and Barbossa, who's on his own path of revenge. There's mermaids, zombies, and a really confusing scenario involving tears and cups, and before you get a chance to understand what's going on, it ends. And the ending is just horrendous. The whole point of these movies is that Jack Sparrow always gets in a tough position when given the chance of immortality. And the ending just makes him a touch out of character, almost as if the last couple of movies didn't happen. While the last couple of films had pretty complicated mythology, this one tones it down, but in the process creates a really dull story. There really isn't much going on. Jack gets captured, goes on the hunt with Blackbeard because they happen to be looking for the same thing, and they find it. It's literally that simple, but they try to expand it by adding these complex rules to the fountain. It's unnecessary, and instead of learning more about this world, you simply get an epilogue to the last film that happens to be 2 hours long. So the story is really boring, but hey, the last 2 films were really long and complex, but benefited from great characters and humor. This time around, not so much. Most of the characters from the trilogy have disappeared, and the humor just isn't there. Sure, a scene or two will create a laugh, but it's mostly stale in the comedic department. We instead need explanation after explanation of the plot and the rules, and this prophecy that Blackbeard heard about his death to a one-legged man. Look, I'm all for these movies going into a weird backstory, but this is never even delved into. Well, Jack Sparrow can surely save this, right? When this movie was coming out, I was so excited that Jack Sparrow was gonna get the free realm to do whatever he wants. We could learn so much about his character, and what do? They give him a love interest and make him unfunny, which is a real shame because Johnny Depp is still trying his hardest to make a worthwhile film. The opening scene is amazing, but after that, it's just an hour-long wait for the climax that's really uneventful. Barbossa is back, but has a completely changed character. Instead of being the protagonist, he's a semi-villain, kind of on his own journey. He honestly serves no purpose other than to kill Blackbeard. We get a scene explaining how the Black Pearl was taken down by the Queen Anne's revenge, but why couldn't this be in the movie itself? We'd care more then. Blackbeard is probably the best part of this movie. Ian McShane is delightful, but it can't match Davy Jones in any capacity. I won't compare though. I'll just say that he made the second viewing worth it. He's got these voodoo abilities, which leads to some pretty cool visuals, but beyond that, it's pretty pointless and there isn't enough of it. The rest of the cast is just okay, but really nothing is given enough focus to care about. There's Angelica, who's the love interest for Jack, but nothing more. I feel like she could have been a really interesting, quirky character, but instead they do almost nothing with her. The priest and the mermaid are a replacement for Will and Elizabeth. I suppose for how much screen time they get, I do sort of buy their romance, but hey, I have a thing for priest characters, so give me a break. The mermaids and the zombies and the voodoo crap, it all seems like a checklist of things the writers wanted to do with this series. Like, they had a conversation about what hadn't been done yet, and most of it's rushed. In fact, the first time I watched this, I didn't even realize Blackbeard's crew was supposed to be zombies. The effects don't seem nearly as heavy in this film, and the overall look is brighter than before. I always think this one stands out because it seems way more oversaturated. It's not a complaint though, but it really helps make it the oddball of the franchise. The music is still amazing though. A lot of the past themes return, but there's also these added acoustic guitar renditions are outstanding. The end credits music is a treat to the ears. I guess my thoughts on this one and why it's easily the worst in the series can be summed up in one word: boring. I keep pressing display on my remote just to see how much is left in the movie. There's no epic scenes or memorable moments. The only thing I remember is the villain's death, which is about as chilling as the death in an Indiana Jones film. But other than that, I can't think of one thing to write home about. This was a disappointing way to continue the franchise. I kind of see the direction they wanted to go in, but making Jack the main focus was probably a misstep. It can probably work with a good enough script, but the story just simply isn't there. We get random sequences that were not needed to fill up an empty screenplay. Look, I love the trilogy, but this was a horrible way to keep it going, and I don't think it's the fault of anyone in particular. It's still a good looking flick, it just needed a little more meat on the bones. When the last few films had moments of sincerity and comedy, this one was simply exposition for an underwhelming plot.
I want one of those.